Hi, everybody. This is Leanne Dempsey, your dramaturg at the National Theater Foundation. And we are here today with James V. Raymond, a professional scenic designer, and honestly, probably a lot of other multi-hyphenate things too in the theater industry. So we're excited to dive into the world of scenic design today. As we know, throughout the season at the National Theater, we see a number of shows with a number of beautiful scenic designs. But honestly, there are amazing people behind those scenic designs. And James V. Raymond is going to talk to us a little bit. So welcome, James. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Now, James, where are you joining us in the world today? Like, where are you coming from? Are you with us? Yeah.
So I'm actually, I am a professor at Shenandoah Conservatory.
Yes.
I teach scenic design and design sets there. So
there it is. Well, welcome. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And as we, dive into the world of scenic design, I'd just love to first just begin a little bit with just like, how do you describe the work that it is that you do in the theater industry?
For sure. Basically, there's this process that we do where we meet as a collective, a creative team. And one of the big things that typically happens is the director kind of has this overall concept of where they want the world that the story should live in. Yeah. And so each kind of department, depending on your lighting, set, costumes, sound even, typically kind of do their own thing, even makeup, sometimes wigs, that can be all separate people. And we kind of go and do our research and we kind of figure out where it all fits in. And then we come together as a group and we really focus on that collaborative effort. Yeah. It's all about collaboration. And so once we start doing our own areas, we kind of work through together, finding out what makes the most sense, either, okay, costumes, where their colors are going, so that my colors for the set doesn't interfere that, and they don't, the actor doesn't blend in with the walls and things like that, or the atmosphere and everything. And same goes with lighting. They got to understand that. So I'm going to actually kind of give you some examples here, but I kind of want to share my screen and kind of talk about some of the work that kind of goes into it.
Yeah. I mean, well, before you jump in, James, yes. One of the really lovely things that we can define for our viewers, especially when it comes to the creation of sets and scenic designs, I think you already brought in a number of things, right? The people that you work with. First, there's this idea of a director's concept that, some students, everyone, we have a number of different plays, but depending on that director and that creative team, how that play is actually produced is, and the creative visuals that come with that have to do with the creative team. And you are one of those people as a scenic designer that's on that team. But before we jump into this, can you first clarify for us, what is the difference between a scenic designer, the actual design of it, and then the person that's building, like the set construction? Are you the same?
So typically it's two separate people. Yeah. The designer is the one that creates the world, is choosing the colors, is choosing the shape, the environment. That really goes hand in hand with the director. Sometimes I have like an idea of a director's cap, right? I have to put on that cap, and I have to, when I read the play or whatever the musical or whatever it is, I'm really pulling out the information of the physical space. So if there's a specific moment where it's very clear that there has to be this door that the actor appears in, or there's a musical called Drowsy Chaperone, and all these characters come out of a refrigerator. Well, you have to physically figure out, as the designer, you got to figure out, okay, aesthetically, where's the fridge going to live on the stage, but also how are you going to get all these actors in and out of that refrigerator? Yeah. So I have to think about the functionality of the space, and I also have to think about the visuals. And then once that all gets kind of figured out, the technical director is the one that runs the shop and basically takes my designs, the set designer has physical renderings and elevations, which are draftings of the whatever the pieces may be, the shot, the size, the shape, things like that. And they go even deeper and find out, okay, what is the skeleton? How does this going to be built? What material is it going to be made out of? So not even just that. They're thinking about safety. They're also thinking about budget. How much is this whole thing going to cost? Sometimes I've done a show where, the set budget was $15,000. Sometimes I'm working on a show right now and we only have $2,000 on a set, which depending on, if you're not used to materials and working with that kind of the lumber and things like that, 2,000 nowadays doesn't go very far with the infrastructure and everything that's going on there. So that is their part, and I work with them very closely to make sure that the overall design that we have created still fits within the budget, within all those things. And so again, it goes back to that collaboration, which is super, super important. And none of this could happen if any of those shops and all those people, the production team, isn't communicating through that process.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm hearing you say about being a scenic designer, I loved what you said about, the scenic designer creates the world, right? You are the visionary for the world. What is this? How do we, and I'm sure you take in mind, the type of space that you're in. If this is a thrust, a black box, a proscenium space, like how do we transport our audience tell this story in the world? And you're talking about line and color and composition. So there's a lot of artistic thoughts that are going into what it is that you're building. So I'd love for you to just show us a little bit, James, a little bit about some of the work that you've done and, just kind of the thought process that goes into, creating a scenic design. I mean, I'm assuming, and this is obviously, I know this, but for our audience members as well, we're reading the play first, right?
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. We need to really get into the material. Yeah. So sometimes it's a play, sometimes it's a musical, sometimes it's for me, because I do event design, which can range from weddings, can range from a party for a corporate event. It can range from a dance piece. I'm doing a whole piece. It's called Over and Under. And basically the audience is viewing these dancers above and below them. And so it's a devised piece, which if you don't know what that means, devised piece basically means that it all gets created as it kind of forms, and it's like a vacuum form. It all kind of grows in that space, in the rehearsal space. And that is something I'm just learning like this year. So that's a very new thing that I'm starting. But yeah, let me kind of go through that. Oh, I don't know why I think that mean.
Sure. No, you're okay. You're good to go.
All right, cool. So scenic design for the theater. This is a show that I worked on in the fall. It's a very heavy show. It deals with feminism and gender, the gender norms and teenagers and bullies and all these kind of things and family relationships. And so one of the things, the concept that the director came up with was this idea of peeling. And there's two ways to look at it. For this, it's like you can either peel away the layers and literally peeling away like paint, but also peeling away in a conceptual way of like, you're peeling away all these layers. Like think people sometimes wear masks in settings, and they are hiding their true self because they want everybody to like them, or they want to be normalized. And so this family is dealing with all this pressure with all these different things. And so one of the ways to look at it is the peeling is like, okay, the world around this family feels like everything is crumbling. At one moment, I felt like it has to be like this roof, this whole heavy piece above them that looks like it could drop any moment and just destroy the whole space.
Yeah.
And that's a very conceptual idea, right? And so it's like, okay, so how do you like fight that? Well, think like physically paint and peeling away. Sometimes you just paint over old paint and you just keep painting until eventually it gets so heavy it just crumbles. And that is like the idea that where we kind of went with this show. And so once we get that concept, part of the next process after you read the script, you do your research. For the show, it was the peeling, right? This is a modern day play. So we knew it was going to be set, but we didn't want it in a super realistic living room space.
Right.
We needed the heavy pieces that grounded the actors and the story, but everything else kind of just had to be this idea, this concept of, again, the peeling, this whole thing we're trying to, clean. Everything's great, everything's fine, and it just keeps crumbling down. So this is a very intimate theater. As you can see, this is where the audience sits. I don't know if you can see my mouse.
Yes.
And sometimes when as we're working on the ground plan, which really kind of hones for the actors and the director where the physical acting space is.
Yes.
And not only for the actors and the director, it helps illustrate visually for the lighting designer where they can hang their lights and where the physical space is so they can make sure they can do their job.
Yes.
But on top of all that, we have to, for this specific theater, the stage floor is leveled with the house audience. So when they come in, they are on the stage basically until you lay out wherever the space may be. Yes. And so part of that is, if you can see this, you can't really see this, but this is a measurement. This is at 6 feet. That means we had to make sure we had enough distance where this first seat was sitting right up against these risers.
Right.
Was where, so that we have enough egress for audience to leave. So that's something also you have to think about as a designer.
Yeah.
So this is, once we get that, now we get the physical space. We're understanding the limitations. We're understanding the scope and where we're going. I go into this rendering process, which is some designers, they do kind of like a watercolor.
Yes.
Or they do color pencils. I do Photoshop. I work with a digital platform, and I took a picture of the space, the physical, the actual theater. So these are the real seats in the audience, in the space, and this is the floor. This is the everything. And then I found my images on Photoshop, or I created them, and then I built the world so that we could visually see what I am interpreting as the world.
Very, very cool.
This is the actual production photo. So we go to the ideas and we develop it all on paper and everything.
Yeah.
And then so once we figure that out, remember that whole thing about the budgeting?
Yeah.
That takes some time because sometimes, we go over budget and then we have to figure out, okay, what can we do realistically? Oh, we have these stock flats. Stock is like things that, we can reuse as much as possible. And those are available. Those are free. So that saves money, things like that. There's so many different layers, but anyway, so we finally get that all budgeted, and then it's all good to go. And then you build it. And then this is the final product.
That's beautiful.
And so, as you can see, there was a few developments, different things that moved around a little bit. But this is showing different elements with the lighting. And my biggest thing for design wise was I wanted to see the texture of the peeling. I didn't want it to be this faux paint, this like fit, this flat painted look. I wanted that texture. Yeah. So to create that, we had to use different materials, and that's actually muslin.
Yeah, it looks like a muslin. Yeah. Very, very cool. And then here's the actors in space.
Yep.
This is beautiful. Now, okay, but we have to stop for a second because James, okay, time out. What is it like when you take a vision from your rendering, you walk into the theater and you see it?
I get goosebumps. I geek out. It's really cool. It's a really great experience. And what's fun is that in that time frame when we get to like get all the things, I call it all the toys. We all get together. We have the lights, we have the costumes, we got the actors on stage, we got the props, we have the furniture, we have everything. Now we get to actually play. All the hard stuff of building and doing all the budgeting and everything, that's all hopefully done by this point. Sometimes, time doesn't make that work. And so sometimes that schedule has to get adjusted. But once you have the physical things and we get to all work together as a team, it's really exciting. That's like my favorite part. Yeah. When it comes together and it works out,
Yeah, and I feel like there's a couple of words that you've been saying that I'm assuming has been part of your training, because I think some of our viewers are going to be like, well, how do I get to do this? Because this is super cool. So you were mentioning texture, you were mentioning measurements and things like that. Now, is that part of your training in becoming a scenic designer? Are you studying color? Are you doing math? Like, because it seems like it might even be really heavily mathematic.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I got actually a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theater with a focus in theater design and technology. And then I emphasized in scenic. So it's a lot. But basically, I learned everything about theater. I had to take acting classes. I had to go to the costume shop and learn how to sew and do all these things. So I'm learning everything so that I could be well-rounded. And honestly, sometimes that's even better. That's great for an actor too. If they don't get that job, because 70% of their job is just auditioning. So if they're not auditioning and they're not on the stage and they have these other talents that they learn through the training, they can get other work and get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
With set design, I got that as a BA. And through that process, because it's an emphasis in set design, I had to learn the process of designing. So that includes learning how to measure things and understanding, when you enter a theater, there's limitations. And so, and how to make a ground plan, which I showed you previously. And then from the ground plan, you go on with the elevations, which is basically like these walls that are here. I have to draft that, meaning I have to draw that in scale.
I would say it's in scale, right? Can you tell our viewers what you mean by in scale?
So basically, I use this computer program called AutoCAD, which is it's a program that where there's several programs. There's AutoCAD and Vectorworks. Those are the popular ones that are basically digital. You get to actually draft your set, or architects use it as well. But before you even go into the computer side, you first learn and train on hand drafting, which is all about using rulers and scale rulers. They have these weird looking rulers that have there's like three sides, and they're different. They're like all divided in different scales, which so you have the full 1 inch, 2 inch, the regular scale. Then they break it down even more. So like, for example, if I wanted to draft my walls, like these walls here, in half-inch scale. That means it literally means that they break the inch into a half. And that half means that's 1 foot.
Yeah.
So it's a little crazy.
It's math though. It's so cool.
Yeah. So as an artist, as a designer, even a technician, those the math that you learn in school, the all that stuff, that goes hand in hand with this.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really useful in these kind of environments.
Yeah, I wanted you to just explain that. Yeah, because I think that it's, what I'm hearing you say also as scenic designer, in the process of reading the play, really diving in, doing your research, understanding the director's concept, going off and creating your own design concept, coming back together and collaborating with the other designers, presenting that and, in doing your plans, and then allowing the technical director to bring that into life. And then you're doing final tweaks and making sure color and line and texture and the play space for the actors and the functionality of the space is there. It's just such a really, really cool process. And I think it's one that sometimes gets, missed a little bit when you're just coming through high school. Sometimes it's like you know a lot about the technical director, but not really, you don't get the chance to do that really cool conceptual work as much. So it's just really cool to have you here and talking to us about this art form, that comes through and really creates the world of the play for us, that's what I had to stop and ask you, because I'm like, when I would pass out. I walk into the I'm like, it's real,
Thank you. And also what's crazy is so you have the technical director, and then the shop is broken down even further.
Yeah.
In professional world, you have the technical director who's in charge of all the paperwork. So drafting, budgeting. Then they have sometimes they have an assistant, and then you have a master carpenter who basically takes those drafts and they build it. Then you have carpenters and things like that. Once it all gets built, then you have another team, a whole nother shop that basically takes these things called paint elevations, which literally is everything broken down, everything like the floor as its own piece. Like if I went back here, I would basically, when I do paint elevations, I remove all the furniture and I would just paint, literally show what the floor is supposed to look like in scale, so that the scenic artist, the charge artist, is somebody who basically makes that happen, makes it look like what it's supposed to look like. For the texture, right?
Yes.
I have to go in detail as a designer explaining how to create that texture. And so they take that information and then that's their job. So it's all these different people that kind of make this stuff happen.
Yeah. And this is really cool too. So, I mean, even outside of the space of theater, we're talking, you mentioned special event designing. So that's almost, if we're looking at a corporate event or we're looking at a personal event, those people are still coming to you with a concept. They're still coming to you with an idea, a look, a feel that they're going for. So I'm excited to dive into this as well. Talk to us a little bit about how this sound translates into special event.
Sure. This, I think I'm trying to remember which one is about to show up. This is a wild, a project that I had. I worked with BarkBox, which is a company up in, their headquarters are in New York City. So I got reached out, and they just moved into this really beautiful office, huge office, and they wanted to have a Christmas event. So it's just a party. This is not anything that, related to business sales or anything, but it was just their employee celebration for them. And so they wanted these really wild designs for their party. And one of them was a dog's mouth. Yeah. So again, going back to the rendering idea, well, I just did a quick little sketch. I started with this and we developed, we talked through budget. We figured out how that was going to all work. And then I did I think I did some rendering. I'm not sure if it's on this, probably not. But then I went into Photoshop and I showed the colors and things like that.
Yeah.
This whole thing, they wanted a red carpet tongue. So we figured out how to do that. And as the designer, but also this is part of my business, which I have my own business. I have to also figure out how to make it work. So I'm basically the designer and the TD in some fashion, and then I farm out people to make a certain pieces. So if I need like this nose to be sewn, I hired a sewer to help me build that, to create that. So this was a very interesting archway. They wanted a dog's derriere for their people to walk through and have a fun time. So this was a very interesting process. And just imagine going to Joann's Fabrics and having this conversation of what materials I need and what I'm creating. And that was a very interesting conversation. I won't get into it because it was a little very specific needs. But this was what it became.
Oh my goodness.
And which was really, really exciting. Again, I had to hire that sewer to create these toe beans, which I didn't even know those were the paws were called toe beans. So I learned something new. So this was a very interesting. I had to figure out how to make each butt cheek and what materials and cost effective. And so that was really fun. That was really fun. That was great. And then they had different theme rooms for this event where they wanted the Stranger Things as one of the events, one of the rooms. And so they wanted the Castle Byers room. And so so I designed that as well. So this is the little fort that they wanted there. Cool. So those are two shows. I'm going to actually real quick show another process that of a very specific musical that was a very rather large musical. And what was interesting about this show was that the director was their directing debut, which was really interesting. Because the director is actually came straight from Broadway. He Michael Park was in the original show. He's also was in the original cast of Dear Evan Hansen. So he has quite a background, but directing was his first time ever getting into this. So that was a whole different experience, which was really wonderful. But I'm going to show you kind of this process in a little bit more depth. This goes back to the research. So you read the script, you learn about the show. The show talks about time. There's this whole family that finds this water that's magical that makes you live forever. And there's all about these references in the music and in the lyrics and the script about time and how precious I can't say it. Precious it is. I can say the word. And how important it is, right? And so, family and things like that. And there's all these different locations. And so as the designer, I had to come up, and it was a tight budget for this show, especially such a big, large show. I had to figure out how to use that stock. Remember, we talked about stock. That is the materials and things that the theater has access to, which saves so much money and time and everything. So I had to incorporate that in the design. So there's limitations there with that, right? You have flats that are very specific size, shape. You have furniture that's a very specific style. And so you have to take that in consideration. And you can paint things and, add additional trims and detail. But with this, I wanted to go conceptual because conceptual sounds like it's like this very rich and fancy thing. It actually costs less. It saves some time because you let the audience use their imagination.
Yeah.
Rather than going into realism.
Yes.
That's very specific and very expensive. So I took the idea of a cuckoo clock as there you go. It's about time. There's all that detail, that trim, right? It's really, really, really interesting. And so to develop this world, that was where the concept I was going with. Here's some, and stop me if you have any questions.
Yeah, no, you're fine. Go for it.
Okay, cool. So here's another location. The family, one of the families, the one family, the Tucks, they are the ones that are living forever. They found this precious well, basically, by this tree, the tree of life, as I call it. That helps them basically live. And so they have this very specific cottage. It's kind of run down a little bit, but it's nice and homey, and they make it work, but it's very cluttered, and it has all this stuff. And this is some other more modern, but very interesting, the shapes and the textures. As a designer, I'm a texture person. I love textures and feelings and when a light scrapes, again, going back to that, the peeling away, right? That light scraping that wall, it's just really stunning. There's something really interesting about that. And the lighting designer gets to play with that. And so I love texture, adding that to the design.
Yeah, which is also like, that just means it's like you're helping the other designer also play, so that's really cool too, that I just heard you say.
So this is historical reference. These are like very specific pictures of that time period. And so, and basically, so you can see there's one moment where there's this traveling carnival. And so we have to look at, like, what does that look like? How did that actually happen? And because we need to, again, we need to ground some of these stories. Yes, I said I'm going conceptual, but sometimes some things have to be grounded, meaning you have to ground them in reality, because there's real physical people, there's real feelings, there's all these things. So some pieces have to be that. And sometimes you can go complete opposite. It could be completely conceptual, and the actor and their feelings, that could be the realist thing. But this is a show that has a lot of stuff, and we wanted some things to be in that physical world, right? So again, here's some more design images. There's a house. There's another house, the Fosters, which is a whole other family. And then we go into the renderings. And this is where I use Photoshop again. So remember that cuckoo clock that we were talking about? Well, I took the idea of the cuckoo clock and I kind of broke it up. And I love the idea of this, like the carved wood, because it goes to the forest, right? We talk about the wood and the well. And so this whole look with this spiral, scroll work can kind of go into like a forest, like into nature, but it also can like ground us into cuckoo clocks. Again, it's not in your face. Like, I'm not trying to be like, hey, this is a cuckoo clock. I want the audience to go in this world and figure out what all this means. And sometimes you kind of let them have their imagination. You don't have to be super direct, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Thank you. And these are some of the different scenes. This is a silo. And that's a whole piece. That base here, this base platform is 8 feet wide.
Wow.
So that's a big piece to, first of all, for actors and crew to figure out how to move on stage. And we go back to, remember that spacing, right? Not only do I have to worry about egress for audience, well, first of all, this isn't a proscenium space. So it's a very different theater space. So now I don't have to worry about audience, because the audiences, they have their own, they're in the house. Now I'm worrying about the physical space on the stage, and how do I make sure all these big units and all these things work together? And that was a challenge.
Yeah.
We had this tree, this big tree. It was actually a teeter-totter. And the actors got to stand on it, and it like lifted up like 10 feet or something. It was really, really cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then this is the tuck house. Remember that whole house where it's very cluttered and it has all these things. And so there was this big clock. It actually is from stock. They used it for Cinderella, but they used it for multiple different shows. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can use this in the design. And again, it's conceptual, but yet it creates this kind of like chaos a little bit too, which is really interesting. And then they go to the attic, and this is a whole separate unit. So I have this unit is actually a flat piece. It's actually a flat. So it looks like it's a roof, but it's actually just hanging completely flat, and it's painted to look like that. So that was kind of interesting. Oh, cool. And that's on a whole. So some theaters have battens, and that gets really technical, but basically you have pipes that can fly scenery and different things. So you have above scenery that can fly in, you have units that can roll on and things like that. But that gets a little bit in the weeds, and so I don't want to get too far in there. But this is another. We had a huge star drop that was stock, so that was LED. So I got to work with the lighting designer to how do we want this lit? Do we want it super bright? They could play with the different things that the drop can do with the LED lights. Then we go to the carnival. This is a kind of like a whole ground row, a separate ground row, which is just this whole contour of a kind of in the distance. I didn't want it to be very specific, right? I didn't want to paint in all the rides and everything. I wanted it to be this really cool, fun, purpley world. And that kind of ties in with this conceptual look, right? So that was kind of fun. And some of the things we had to think about was some pieces had to be reused for different things. So remember that silo? Yes. Well, this is the same. That's the same unit. It actually just spinned around, and the backside becomes the ticket booth. So that was very fun. And then you have the samples of ground plans. And so this is, again, going back to, okay, now we have to break down different scenes and where do these pieces live and all this stuff. And it that creates challenges and everything. Yeah.
Now, in this process of building, that looks beautiful. That's the real thing. See, another freak out moment where you go, oh my God. It's so amazing to see it. I mean, when just my only other question in regards to this is when you're doing the renderings and you're doing the ground plan, right? What is the time that you're doing that versus when the actors start rehearsals? Is all of this work done prior to when actors come on and they start rehearsing?
Yeah, this is all like months before they get even in the space.
Wow.
Or even rehearse. Typically, you'll basically get hired. They contract you in. And it's several months before the production itself, and then there's like there's different timelines because sometimes we start super early, sometimes it starts kind of in between, and then super tight depending on the time frame. But it's typically right before the rehearsal.
Yeah, probably at least 2-3 months ahead.
Yeah, easily. And then sometimes my process just to design and everything, I kind of hopefully try to give myself 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the size of the scope of the show, right? Unprotected, that first show that I showed you, very small, very intimate piece, don't need as much of that 8 to 10 weeks to design and create. Sometimes it takes time to just develop the design, but as far as like the skills and the physical material that I have to develop in order for the shop to do its thing,
Yeah.
Sometimes, depending on the show and the scope, those time frames can vary.
Very, very cool. Now this is another scene, yeah? And
Yes, this is the foster house. And
beautiful.
that whole unit flips around as well. And sometimes those the fences disappear and things like that.
Yeah.
And then this is the carnival.
Beautiful. So cool.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, in this, I mean, before I ask you our age-old question that we like to anchor our interviews with is, are there other images here that you need to show us? Because I want to make sure we get.
This is it.
Oh my God. Well, this is such a beautiful piece. I mean, it's so amazing. Okay, one more design question. One more.
Yes.
The beautiful trim at the top. All of this, it looks like it looks like it took someone a long time to carve and cut and make this thing look beautiful. What am I looking at? How did this happen?
You know how I said I love texture, I love layers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, in my original design, that's what I really wanted. I wanted to get foam and I wanted different materials to create those layers. And so when the light hits it, we can see all this. Well, turns out that cost a couple $1,000, and not only money wise, it costs man out. We call it man hours, which sounds sexist, but we budget hours for people to actually develop those things and build it and then paint it. And when you're working with foam and different materials, sometimes there's different layers you have to create. So you have to put a foam coat or some sort of coating so that the paint can stay. Anyway, to get all that, we just realized time-wise and budget-wise, that wasn't going to happen. So the simplest way was to do a faux painting, which basically is you basically create that layers with just paint. It's just paint.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Which turned out beautiful. And these were all undergrads. These are students that are learning have the tools, and they're in training. I didn't even touch the scroll work as a painter, because I in this position for this show, I also had to work in the shop. So I was the charge artist with a co-charge artist. But this was all mostly students that kind of went at it. I gave them the paint elevation, gave them the step-by-step, and they went at it. And it took probably, I think it was like a weekend. Yeah, it was probably like a weekend. So they really went at it. And it's just 1/2-inch plywood. That's it.
Yeah, so it's actually fairly light.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is really, really cool. Yeah. I mean, I love that you brought us to the students, because that's usually where we like to bring it home to, James. Yes. When we think about this journey. First of all, thank you so much for sharing the process. I think the process is so valuable for our viewers, because it's a process that kind of can get lost, and you're kind of like, well, how did they get to this point, and just to know that being a scenic designer is an option. And man, the art, the conceptual work, the reading of the play, the math that goes in here, there's so many talents that I know a number of our viewers are going to have, where this fits right into what it is that they see themselves being really good at. And so if you think about yourself, James, when you were in high school, was this something that you wanted to do right off the bat, or did you discover this? Where were you in high school when it comes to theater?
So I was like one of those crazy children where I dragged all my neighborhood kids. This was probably like first, second grade. And I took them into my childhood basement, my parents' home, and I built a whole stage down there. We played, and we played dress up, and I did shows, and it was fun. We just hung out, and that was something that I got involved in because I was struggling in school. I got held back in first grade. I had trouble reading, and my first grade teacher told my mom, she's like, you know what, you need to get James into theater. I think that's going to really help with his ego and his reading and comprehension, but also it's a creative outlook. And so theater, I mean, I started acting, really. I got more involved in the performing side. While I was playing dress up and making puppet shows and things like that, and then creating these stages in my basement, I still performed and loved all that, and that helped me kind of work through school and figure out all that kind of stuff. So so I did all that. I grew up by a convent, which is like this Catholic home for nuns. And they lived right next door, and that was like my other home. And so I would basically I would hang out with the nuns and sing with them, but I also would put shows on for them. I would take the neighborhood kids and say, hey, we're putting on a show. And we set up and load in their sun parlor. And I had Sister Dolores on the piano, and Sister Karen I had her playing a part in the show. And that was something that I was super heavily, that was my passion. And so I started developing, because I also was very skilled in the fine arts, painting and things like that. And so I realized I was developing these skills, although I loved being on stage, and honestly, I miss it. Would love to get back on stage. I realized that I could really make a career out of designing. And so once I figured that out, after I got, once I was looking at schools for college, I was I really want to get a BA so I could learn all the things, but also hone my craft in set design. And so once I did that, I worked for 2 years, did some design work, and then started to get my master's, Scenic Design and Technology at West Virginia University. So got that in 2018. So
wow. I mean, that's so cool. The fact that obviously then there was something just innately connected to theater for you coming up as a young person. So that's really, really awesome. And to see even just that connection of theater and fine arts, you know what I mean? There's so many overlaps that you have that I think is going to be really inspiring for our viewers, because we are performers and we are also designers and we are also fine artists, and it's really nice to see, especially just, and the fact that you're a professor also brings in education, right? Allows our students and our viewers to see that there is so much to the theater world that a lot of people aren't aware of. And I want, just for our final question, make sure you stop sharing your screen. And we're going to ask you the main question that we love to ask at the very end of this is, okay, so our viewer, there's someone watching you right now, James, and they're like, I want to do exactly what James is doing. To the T. No, but there's an idea. I really want to be a scenic designer, and I'm in high school. And there's just so much about what your story looks like. It looks like one of our viewers. What would you tell someone in high school that aspires to be a scenic designer? What would you tell them for where they are right now?
Yeah. First, go and paint, draw, develop those skills with your hands, learn how to do all those things. Those are the primary things that you have to learn, and try to develop those skills. Try to paint or draw every day. I mean, it's hard. I know schedule gets crazy. You have homework, you have all these things, you have chores. I get that, but devote some time, in your bed while you're watching Netflix, hanging out. Paint a little bit, draw, sketch. You can even just sketch on a little journal. I have this little journal where I have notes for different shows or what I'm going through and things I have to do on a regular basis. But then I also have areas where I just sketch when I'm planning stuff. So that's really good. And then I also, if you're about to graduate or you're starting to look at schools, look at programs that have set design, that have these areas of focus that you really, really are passionate about, because then you're going to really basically open your toolkit, and they're going to help you get these tools that you need in order to get to that next step. And then, the other thing, if maybe school's not your thing, and trust me, school is hard. It is not for everyone. I can't even believe I have a master's because I had a really low GPA in undergrad, but I worked really hard, and I found places that I could get work and do things. And one way to do that is find local community theaters and get involved, like help paint, see if they'll let you design and get to play. What's fun about community theater is it's low stakes. You get to make mistakes. You get to figure out who you are as a designer, and it's fun, and there's no pressure. Sometimes, like for me, I was always like nervous and everything, but it really is a great intro to this kind of stuff. And I think get involved as much as you can.
Yeah, I think, first of all, thank you so much, James, for being with us. And I think that's just great advice. And it just starts, I love your advice. It's just very, very achievable things, like start drawing, start painting, find it while you're watching TV, just allow yourself to develop those skills with your hands. And I love that directive of when you're looking at collegiate programs to look for the things that you're passionate for. Make sure that you're going to get what it is that you need when you get into those four-year universities. So, I mean, we could talk design all day. I think the designs that you showed us are magnificent. I cannot wait to see something that you've designed, James, because I think it's going to be fantastic, of course. So please let us know when you're going to be doing another piece somewhere, because I'd love to come see it. And obviously, I want to see the rendering first, that when I walk into the theater, I can actually like pass out and be like, oh my God, it's real. That's great. The part. But anywho, thank you so much for being with us.
Real quick, one thing also I just thought about too, to add to that, is reach out. Research designers, local designers, even like Broadway people, a lot of them are pretty nice. And if, I have this really great high school student who just goes and designs at high schools and designs at community theater. Like, you get involved in your high school theater program. Yeah. But one thing he's really good at that I was not good at was reaching out to designers. He reached out to me. I kind of I kind of helped him develop some skills. He kind of worked on some shows with me, and I saw his work from, a simple sketch to like developed renderings. He was using computer renderings that I don't even use. And it was really great that he's really understanding the process of design. Now he's going to go get training. He's going to do all that stuff. But he's also reaching out to those designers and saying, hey, I'm interested in this. What are some things that a young designer, like someone who has no experience, shoot, I think I have my email on this thing, and you guys any of your students are welcome to reach out to me. And you can also reach out to me on my website as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And so thank you so much.
Yeah. And James, your website is James V. Raymond?
Yes, jamesvraymond.com.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So yes, everyone, please reach out and ask questions if you have anything else. But once again, we thank you so much for joining us with Teens Behind the Scenes and giving just a little peek into the creative process and into the career of being a scenic design. Thank you all for watching another great interview with another great designer and another great theater career. And I cannot wait to see all of you in the upcoming shows, enjoying the shows at the National. And James, we can't wait to see another show that you've designed. See you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye.